Warning. The following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
It is the showcase of the immortals, the grandest stage of them all. Welcome to the pageantry, WrestleMania. Was that a good Michael Cole? That was my best Michael Cole that I could do. Welcome to Hot Takes with Billy Biz. This is a special edition. Now, I know a lot of you tuning in are like, wait a minute. Where's the movie talk? Why are we not talking about Marvel? Why are we not talking about Star Wars? Don't worry. Next week, it's all going back to normal. But this week, it's WrestleMania week. So if that's not your jam, I get it. Click out. Go listen to some of the old ones and come back next week for another one. But if you're a wrestling fan, this is going to be a treat because in the digital, not real, not even close studio with me today is Ken Napzok.
That's right, brother. Ooh, yeah. Dig it. I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
With the fuel and the rocket ship.
We've been known on Reboot It to just kind of casually drop some dusty road in the middle of a pitch, baby. You don't know why it happens, but it happens, baby. This is going to be fun. It's WrestleMania week, even though it doesn't kind of feel like it. Feels a little off. This is the first WrestleMania since 35, which was 2 years ago, that there's going to be people there. The first WWE event with people in well over a year at this point. But we're kind of building our own excitement. Let's talk about WrestleMania.
Yeah.
The legacy, the tradition.
Watching. Yeah. Sorry.
The world is watching. Yeah. So lately I've been listening to, that's actually accurate. I was going to say I've been watching a lot of WrestleManias, the old ones, but I've really been listening to them because they're kind of nice to have on in the background and you catch some moments. And I think that's where you really do find that there are true WrestleMania moments, because when you know they're coming, you kind of stop what you're doing and you kind of look to your left. But I want to ask you, because I actually don't know this. I've known you for a long time, but I don't know the answer to this question. When did the wrestling bug bite you, and what was your first WrestleMania that you either were allowed to order on pay-per-view by your parents, or maybe you came to it later and you just ordered it on your own?
Yeah, that's so funny. That's a great question because it was later. But I was there for WrestleMania 1 and 2, a little bit after WrestleMania 1, but I remember WrestleMania 2 is the first one I watched, in the sense that my mom and dad let me rent Coliseum home videos, and it was WrestleMania 2. Oh God, look, King Kong Bundy. And I was born in 76, and so became a wrestling fan early on, but then, you don't pay attention too much. And then my dad was a casual fan from his own youth. And my late uncle was a wrestling fan, and we're a Russian family. So my uncle loved Nikolai Volkov,
of course,
and they were the ones that first broke the news to me that, it might not be on the up and up. And I was about 7 or 8. And so leading into WrestleMania 1 or 2, and I just remember kind of pulling off what? It's all, I won't use the fake word too much, but what? It's fake. And then I came back in 89, 90 into 91. Because the British Bull, I love Davey Boy. I love the British Bulldogs back in the day. And so when I found out Davey Boy Smith was now a singles wrestler, I kind of was like, oh, my friend, a friend of mine was talking about it. And we were outcasts at high school. And I was just like, you talking wrestling? He's like, yeah. I was like, oh, I hear Davey Boy Smith's back. Yeah. And I've been in ever since, been in and out of the wrestling business over the last 20 years on a very small independent level. And I go through these periods of time, as you and I discuss these WrestleManias. I go through periods of time where I didn't watch. And then right now, this might be the first one of 10 years that I'm not planning to watch because I don't have the app, the network anymore, because it switched to Peacock, and I haven't made the switch yet. But it was also a long-winded answer. But the first one that I actually watched, not scrambled, because I couldn't afford it, and my parents didn't understand how to order a pay-per-view, was WrestleMania 9.
Okay, that's Caesar's Palace.
Yes, but I watched 6, 7, and 8. I watched it on the squiggly lines, I was watching porn, but it was wrestling.
I mean, there's still nipples and breasts, just sweaty big men instead this time. Or I don't know. I don't know what you're ordering. So for me, look, I grew up in, I was born in 86. So I was like 3, 4, like, when Hulkamania was at its prime. I know the first WrestleMania was, before I was actually born, but I grew up like in the era of Hulkamania. I had Hulk Hogan slippers. I think I had the wrestling buddies, but what's funny was I was more into everything around wrestling than the actual wrestling itself. I don't have any or very many memories of actually watching it. I just knew like Hulk Hogan was cool, and I probably liked his cartoon more than I actually liked wrestling. And that lasted for a couple of years, but then it was like, but Batman is cool, and I like Batman, and then Star Wars and all that came along. So I can't really say I was like a huge wrestling fan. Yeah. Then comes the Attitude Era, and I'm in 7th grade. And I mean, like, the stars can't align any better than, 98 hitting 7th grade. And I remember all my friends were into it, and I was just like, oh, but it's fake, And they're like, yeah, it's almost like they didn't hear me, I was like, but they already know who's going to win. They're like, but anyways. And I was just like, okay, well, I don't want to be uncool. Yeah. So who would have ever thought in a million years, I don't want to be uncool, so I'll watch wrestling. But I didn't really know where to start. So when I got into wrestling, I actually started with like Wolfpack NWO. Like that was the stuff, like I started watching WCW. I didn't really know what the difference was. Right. And I was like, I don't know, where is Austin? Is he on this one? Like, so it wasn't until 99 where I had the lay of the land. I knew what was what, and I started gravitating more towards WWF at the time. And the first show that I ever went to was a SmackDown in 2000, and life-changing. It really was life-changing. I was like, I love this. So the first WrestleMania that I ever convinced my mom to drop at that time an egregious $34.99 on, I was like, I will do whatever it takes, was WrestleMania 2000. I think I had seen WrestleMania 15, but the first one I got to order was WrestleMania 2000. It should have nostalgic feelings for me. I actually think that's in my bottom 5 worst WrestleManias of all time, which is nuts because the next like 4 shows are some of the best shows in like in that 10-year span. Like Backlash 2000 should have been what WrestleMania was. But yeah, that's kind of when my love started. And what's so funny is those kids that I wanted to think I was cool, they grew out of it like a year later. And here I am, what is it now? Like, almost coming on 20 years or whatever it is. And I'm still there over 20 years at this point. And I'm still like, and I've had my, we've talked about a lot. You get your periods where it's hot and you're super into it and you're watching SmackDown, Raw, you're reading Meltzers and all this stuff. Then there are other times, there have definitely been years where like I just stopped. I think like 2009 to about 2012. I just like, I didn't watch anything except WrestleMania. I always ordered WrestleMania just to see what was going on. By a certain point, I was like, I don't even know who half these kids are, but it's WrestleMania. I can't not order WrestleMania. So I have seen every WrestleMania since 2000. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Kind of our favorites, our least favorites, highlights, lowlights. Ken, have you ever been to a WrestleMania?
I have not. I've definitely been to a couple Raws, a couple SmackDowns, a couple house shows. But even that kind of came a little bit late in life. But my parents didn't take me to things much. And then, a lot of indie shows in and around LA, but not a WrestleMania. And I got to tell you, would I love to go? Yes, I'd love to go with someone like you or people that we know who really just appreciate wrestling on the same level I do, and not which is side conversation of just like I'm not a mark, man. I mean, we're all marks, but I'm not a smart mark. I'm not a armchair quarterback. I just love it. I love the art form. I do think it's an art form. I want to go enjoy it. So if I find the right people to go with, I absolutely want to go. But I got to tell you, it's become so big. I don't know if I could sit for 7 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is. And I know they're split up in 2 nights. I know, but like, I don't know if I could do it. I'd rather be at home watching it as my own toilet.
So it's funny you say that because I've been to 2 WrestleManias.
Okay.
Consequently, I think one is the best WrestleMania of all time. And I think the other one that I went to is the worst WrestleMania of all time. And I actually want to start there. I don't like to be negative, but I want to start with the worst WrestleMania, I think, not just like that I've had to personally endure, but I think of the entire WWE history.
Interesting.
I was there in Dallas for WrestleMania 32, and it was borderline cruelty. It was torture. So we get to the stadium. It's a brand new stadium. Like I don't think that they really knew how to function quite yet. Right. They ran out of water bottles in the first 15, 20 minutes of the show.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Yes.
So I found one vendor who had 3 left, and I bought all of them. And I felt like, Charlie Bucket just slowly eating my Wonka bar, just trying to savor these 3. Ken, it was 5.5 hours.
Yeah.
5.5 hours. And here's the thing. If it had been a great show, just top to bottom, great show, yeah, I would have been like, okay, this is a little long, but you know what? Like, I'm going to someday look back at this and be like, wow, what an experience. That first ladder match was like, oh man, I'm really into this. Zack Ryder getting a win. That's kind of neat.
That. Yeah, I loved that.
And then when Jericho AJ came on, I was like, okay, this is a good match. And that finish just sucked the wind out of that building. It never came back.
Right.
And it was, I think that night is a 5.5 hour ode to the fans saying, we don't know what you want. We think we know, but is this it? And after 6 hours, I'm like, no, that was not it. Like literally nothing about this is it. That main event got booed out of the building, and it was 40 minutes long. It was just, Thoughts on WrestleMania 32?
I'm looking at it now. Oh, yes. I remember. Yeah. You're right. I'm looking at the card, but I was looking at the year, and I remember I had a friend coming over who is, we were going to go do something. And I said, come over around this time. I'm watching WrestleMania, and she's not a wrestling fan. And I came over and I was like, it's almost done. It's almost done. That Triple H Roman Reigns match went for 20. I'm looking at 27 minutes, 11 seconds. And for 26 of those minutes, she was just like, I'm gonna go. And I'm like, no, it's almost done.
I mean, I had look, I'm not trying to, humble brag or anything. Like, I had really good seats. This was back when I worked at Wizard World, and we had a relationship with WWE, and they would give us WrestleMania tickets. So it's not like I was at the tippy top of the stadium. Like, we had really good seats, and I was just like, if I am in this building for 5 more minutes, I'm going to kill myself. Like, I hate wrestling. I hate it. Get me out of here. Which sucks because you know what? I had a blast at NXT on Friday night, and I had a blast at WrestleMania Access on Saturday. And by the time Shane and Undertaker do their Hell in a Cell match, I was like, please let this be the last that I can't do any more than this. And there was still 3 or 4 more segments to go. It just, none of the storylines, all the matches were just matches you didn't want to see. You had Dean Ambrose going up against Brock Lesnar.
Right.
You didn't want to see Brock take on Dean. It just wasn't interesting. And they had set this up where Dean could possibly take the title from Triple H weeks before WrestleMania, and everyone was really into that.
Yeah.
So, and then they just pull it all, the wool right over your eyes. Bray Wyatt has a really weird segment with The Rock. They were just throwing Hail Marys left and right. Remember Shawn Michaels? Remember Stone Cold? Remember The Rock? And I'm just like, so that's a tough one.
Yeah, the thing about it, there's a lot of them once you get to the 30s. And WrestleMania 30, I have listed as one of my favorite ones. But again, you can go match by match on the card, and you could you could prop them up or you can prop the whole event down based on each match. And you and I are going to be talking about some of the big memories and the emotional connections. But once you get to the 30s, they're so good at making an event. You're talking about NXT Access. I would like to go to that stuff. You and I know I love conventions. You work conventions. You probably have some scarring in your heart, but you probably still love conventions. But it's almost like by Sunday, it's getaway day at Comic-Con where you're like, I can't go to one more panel. And that's WrestleMania.
Yeah, that's the day. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they split it off. Again, I haven't been there, so I don't know. But WrestleMania 32 is a prime example of, and there's some big indie promotions back in the day that used to do this where they believe their own hype in a way. They're very confident and like, hey, we've got them. We can put on a 4-hour show, start 2 hours late. No one's going to leave because we're us. And
Right.
I think a lot of WrestleManias in the 30s kind of reached this. We are the showcase of the Immortals. We are aware of our history, and we're going to make those moments. And you have a Zack Ryder moment. That stands out. You can never take that away from Zack Ryder. Great moment. It's great little Charlotte versus Becky and Sasha is a great accomplishment. That was a good match, and it's only gotten better for the women's division since then. But that was an event I remember thinking, you are not as important as you want to be.
Well, they kept trying to make WrestleMania moments and said, like Shane jumping off the top of the Hell in the Cell, like seeing it in person was just like, it's more terrifying than it is like, and people like, I was kind of watching people watch it and just seeing like, yeah, jump. I'm like, it's just the one moment where it pulled me out of the moment. And I'm just like, we are cheering on this man who, even if this is stunt padded, this is so dangerous. Like they're just trying so hard to make that show is about like, let's make WrestleMania moments. John Cena comes in to make the save. Why? He's still injured. He's not coming back for 6 more months. Like it just felt like a lot of attempts to make moments that weren't earned. And you're right. And some of those late 20s, early 30s ones, they had moments, but and they a lot of them work. Nothing in this show I feel like worked, and it sucked. And I feel like I had a great weekend, and I had a ton of fun with the friends I was with, Mo Lightning and Balls from Wizard World. But just the low light of WrestleMania weekend was WrestleMania. Everything else was like a blast. So when you hear later on my other WrestleMania experience, you're like, oh, well, it's biased because you were there. It's like, no, the worst WrestleMania that like even rewatching it like lately was like, God, this thing is still on. Like I've been cleaning the house all day and this thing is still going. Yeah. All right. So WrestleMania 32. Ken, what's a WrestleMania that you love?
WrestleMania that I love. I'll start. Let's work up. I don't know if you want to work up. We're just kind of flying by the seat of our pants here. So let me give you one that I think I have a special place in my heart for WrestleMania 9. The event itself doesn't stand the test of time, but it's such a spectacle. Me and my friends all wore togas at our house, and we were coming out of high school. It was a special event, but WrestleMania 10 years, they did make it a big thing. It's Madison Square Garden. I think you would talk about, they just put good performers together, did things that were unexpected. And I always go back to that. There's at least 3 moments or matches. I think Crush Randy Savage is underrated. Owen and Brett get celebrated. And then the ladder match is everything it's cracked up to be. And even though things have gotten, better and dangerous and more crazy, and I'm all for wrestling just changing and getting bigger and bolder, but I go to that one. And I remember even some of the, maybe Earthquake Atom Bomb isn't on my list, but even Bam Bam and Luna Vachon versus Doink and Dink, like even that had some moments that we were standing on our feet cheering at home, and they just things kind of got there organically and created great moments.
The last match I think that Savage would have with WWF before going over to the other side. This was one that like once. So this is like, I'm about to get real old real quick right here. One thing that I really do miss is every Friday after school, 7th and 8th grade, I would get to go to Blockbuster and pick out, a couple of videos for the weekend. And I would always pick up a pay-per-view, VHS. And I never knew what order they were supposed to go in, so it's just like, I'm watching things very like, wait, they're friends now? I must have missed something. But once I ran through like, 98, 99, in, like, okay, I've seen everything from there. Like, I was like, I guess I could go back to the old ones, the bad ones, because old was bad.
Sure.
But this was one that I picked up. I was like, okay. And it blew me away. This is the event that made Shawn Michaels my all-time favorite wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big Michaels guy, and I was a Rockers fan, and man, I was there. I was watching that Saturday morning program when he put Jannetty through the window. That broke my heart. I was, stunned. Though we all saw it coming months ahead. But I was dubious when he switched. Like, and Sherry's coming out with him and singing that song. What's going on there? And this is, but I love WrestleMania 9. Him and Tatanka's a decent opener, I thought, and Luna Vachon coming out was pretty cool. But this one, year later, this is the one. You're right. This he becomes the showstopper here to me. Even though he had some good WrestleMania moments before that, he was on a lot. 6 and 7 and 8 and 9. He's got the experience. He really, it is what it is. And sometimes you and I, over in that other world where we used to debate movies, sometimes I always would say the answer is the answer. That is a great match because it's a great match.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think if ever you were to pinpoint like what WrestleMania did Shawn Michaels become Mr. WrestleMania, I would make a strong argument like it's right here. WrestleMania 10. At the Garden. Love the old Garden, just the small little entryway. I those are my favorite pay-per-views. Just until I was heartbroken when they changed it, but things change. Let's take another WrestleMania that I absolutely love. We're gonna jump forward in time here quite a bit. This was one that when rewatching it, I guess I never realized, like, wow, this WrestleMania is star-studded. Like, it's super star-studded, packed. And it has reasonably, you could argue, it has 4 solid main events. Like, any 4 of those matches could close the show, and you'd be like, yeah, that sounds about right. I'm talking about in Seattle, 2003, WrestleMania 19. This was one where the only of one of those 4, we're talking about Triple H versus Booker T for the World Heavyweight title. We're talking about Hogan versus Vince, which should have been terrible and is one of the most brutal street fights I've seen in WWE in years. Rock versus Austin 3, the closing of that trilogy of WrestleMania matches. And of course, Lesnar and Angle. All 4 of those, like, just by itself, that's pretty, like, yeah, that's incredible. You don't get 4 marquee matches like that anymore. Yeah.
No, and then Michaels, Jericho, Triple H, Booker T.
Michaels, Jericho. How could I forget about that? That in itself is like a 5th main event in a weird way.
Well, I actually, to be honest, I thought you were working to that point of the fact that Michaels, Jericho kind of stole the show in some people's mind, even though there's spectacular stuff. And that, and I've studied a lot of the Rock Austin stuff when I wrote that documentary for Wondery on Rock versus Austin, and that one's even overlooked for their feud. The other ones might have been better, but this one it's pretty passionate. So no, there's a lot of stuff there, and it's interesting because you and I talk about dipping in and out of the air. I think you and I've talked off air about this before, but I was there for the start of the Attitude Era. Big Steve Austin fan because I was like, oh my gosh, stunning Steve Austin's the WWE ringmaster. I'm all on board for this. I moved to LA 1998. One of my roommates, I'm still close friends with, we love wrestling. In fact, we had a front yard wrestling federation in the 90s. We weren't serious enough to have a backyard fed where we thought we were actual. We loved the pomp and circumstance side of it. And then our other 2 roommates just didn't like it. And that was back, I couldn't watch on the we had one TV in the apartment between 4 of us. And so I stopped watching wrestling and got out of the habit. I missed the bulk of the Attitude Era. And I have had to go back and kind of rediscovered a lot of the big ones. And this is one of those WrestleManias I did go back and kind of rediscover. And I'm with you. It's a bunch of performers at the peak, and that's rare.
Yeah, this was when they were at that weird cusp of Attitude Era is changing into the ruthless aggression era, which is essentially just slightly less, like, I want to say sexual, maybe more violent, but a lot of new talent. This was Cena is going to be coming up in a big way in the next year. Batista, Evolution, Orton, they are waiting in the wings. And I feel like this WrestleMania not only is just like star-studded and big matches, but it also feels like a little bit of an end of an era WrestleMania in hindsight. It's Austin's last WrestleMania. It was Rock's, not his last WrestleMania, because he would do 20 and then obviously he would go on for a little while. But seeing Rock in a somewhat full-time basis, and certainly as a heel, this was kind of it. This would be the last WrestleMania that Taker was the American Badass before he would go back to the dead man gimmick. A lot of like lasts in this one, so it feels a little bit like a passing of a torch, especially with Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar. It's a special. Brock Lesnar should never have done a shooting star press. Right, almost killed himself. But nonetheless, a great WrestleMania. So Ken, time for you to get dark. Time for you to get gritty. A WrestleMania that you would just throw back in the sea if it were a fish.
Oh man, so I'm trying to go to I'll go old, and you can tell me you're a little younger than me. Tell me how much you think of it. I really think WrestleMania 5 is one of my least favorites, because the main event, which is great, the Mega Powers collide, Savage Hogan. They built to that for a year. That is everything you want it to be. That's pretty good. But coming off of WrestleMania 4, which I have a special place in my heart for WrestleMania 4. It's the
tournament one.
Tournament. It's bloated. It's long. It's like 16 total matches or something. And I remember even as a kid with the Coliseum home video, just going, "Oh, maybe I could fast forward to this." And I'm a lifelong wrestling fan. Even anything I say negative tonight, I still have an immense respect for the art form and the business and love it. It's in my blood. But I always say sometimes wrestling is best watched on the fast forward button, just like Monday Night Raw, 3 hours. I mean, win.
Just take me. I want Red Zone for wrestling. Just take me to the finish. I
want the entrances, because I'm a big mark for entrances.
Same.
Which is why I love a lot of the big WrestleMania stuff, and a good finish. But WrestleMania 5, I think you look at that golden age, and we can talk about 6, which has some good stuff. 8 is bloated, but 5 is bloated, and 5 is representative of 14 matches. It's representative of them going, wow, we exploded on the world. WrestleMania 1 worked. 2 kind of didn't, but 3, which I can't wait to talk about, is the standard bearer. And then 4, they got bigger, and they're at Trump's Taj Mahal. We can, that now has different meaning than it did back then for us. But you look at this card, it's just a lot of the era. The foundations were starting to crumble in my head a little bit, where just McMahon's big, bulky, immovable object kind of booking and stuff was starting to wane on a lot of people a little bit. And by 8 and 9, things weren't working as much. So anyways, just a lot of just matches. Roberts versus Andre, not great. Rude Old Warrior was good, but not glad. Bad News Brown, Jim Duggan. Red Rooster, Bobby Heenan. I mean, Mr. Perfect makes his debut against the Blue Blazer, Owen Hart. Rest in peace, Owen. But even I'm a big Demolition fan, but Demolition versus Powers of Pain, Dino Bravo, Ronnie Garvin. These are not thrilling wrestlers. And when you look back in the golden days, I think it's easy to overlook a lot of this bloat.
This sounds like a really nice Sunday afternoon house show. Minus the main event.
Yeah.
Because I do think that main event, at least on paper, is, that's something to see,
Oh, it's definitely worth watching. I love Macho. I like Hogan too. Let me, it's I know it's troublesome to admit that sometimes, and I understand who he is to a lot of people, but I'm of that era where I booed Hogan sometimes because I wanted him to lose, but he made everything big, made everything important, and it deserves to be watched. But yeah, 4 or 5, 6, it just and back, it's funny you mentioned it, back in the day, I think by WrestleMania 1 and 2, it was like another day on the calendar for a lot of these wrestlers. Like, I got to go to. We got to go up to the Nassau Coliseum. We got to work Vince's big show. And then by 3, it became something that it is. And 5 was that first, like, to me, we are this thing. And it maybe just didn't live up to that.
I think it was either 4 or 5. One of because they did back-to-back at the Trump, whatever.
4, yeah.
one of those was the first, like they did the breakfast with the wrestlers in the morning. Like it was the first to become like kind of a weekend event. It might have been 5.
Makes sense.
Because that's what WrestleMania is now. Like I was saying, like Axis to me was like
Right.
actually hands down better than 32.
Yeah.
So you're talking about bloating, and I think that's a perfect segue to talk about, let's come back around to what I said. The very first one that I ordered was WrestleMania 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, there's one singles match on the entire card, and it is either like a panties or thong or whatever sexist chauvinist.
It's Terry Runnels versus the Cat.
That is the only singles match on that entire card, and I get it. In 2000, you're at a point where like the superstars are, they are the celebrities, so you want to try to pack in as many as you can. Unfortunately, it feels like everyone gets shortchanged on the show. And even watching it now, it's just like I've come to the realization, something that people have been saying for years, so it's not like I'm making some grand observation, but you really realize that in 99 and at least some of 2000, because this doesn't apply to all of 2000, but entertainment, number one, sports, not so much. The wrestling in 99 is just bad. Like, find me a 5-star match in 1999. Like it's certainly not going to be easy. There's some decent ones. I think Austin Rock WrestleMania 15, but like once we get to WrestleMania 2000, like none of these matches are like, you just don't remember many. And I know you're saying like, well, what about the first quasi unofficial TLC match? And it's yes, that was a spectacle. That was a lot of stunts, and I think stunts absolutely in spots have their place in wrestling. And I think that was like at that point just mind blowing. But even that triple threat match, when I was rewatching a couple weeks ago, it's like, oh, I forgot, like Benoit, Jericho, and Angle. This is going to be great. And it was like, it was good. But again, it just felt so like, you got to go. There's 55 more people that got to come out here. So not my favorite WrestleMania. I just don't think it's that great.
I actually own this on DVD still. I remember
that's a collector's item, by the way. You could sell that for a lot of money.
I probably need to right now. Because it was I was coming out of an era where I was like, I haven't watched a lot of, let me try to get back into it. I was really get back into it, and I just own it. But I remember putting it on a little on the network a while ago, and it's so funny you mentioned that. Yeah, there's talent here. There's so much talent, but it was a little bit, wrestling had become, it was water cooler conversations. You made a joke about I wanted to be cool, so I started to like wrestling. I remember I was in radio in the mid 90s, and we were interviewing my radio partner, Matty D, hooked it up. He wrote to WWF, and we got on their marketing little wing in SoCal, even though we're Central Coast. So if they came to did house shows, we did interviews with Savio Vega, Paul Bearer, Honky Tonk Man, I remember one point, and this new guy coming up, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And we did phoners with these guys. And I remember our radio guy, our program director, was like, what are you doing? Like, no one wants to hear this stuff. And within 2 years, because it's Stone Cold, because Rock, it changed. And now it's catchphrases and T-shirts. And I look at this WrestleMania, because one of my memories of this WrestleMania, I mentioned I like entrances. China and Too Cool and the Radicals. I remember watching China and Too Cool come out. And this is a couple years ago. I'm just going, there's 3 performers so over. The crowd is, whatever they do after doesn't really matter. It's just those wrestlers, 3 wrestlers in this time coming up, turn it up, doing all the stupid stuff. And China with the gun, she's shooting stuff. It's so spectacle. And which is part of the reason I love wrestling. But you don't remember what comes after. So when you sit down and watch what comes after, you're like, oh, yeah, okay.
I mean, besides her pants like falling off, didn't like her pants break in the match. What's really kind of sad about that, I was just thinking as you said that, let's see, that was a 6-man tag.
Yeah.
3 of those 6 participants are no longer with us.
Yeah, that's always, don't go to WrestleMania 6. Yeah, it gets a little depressing.
Yeah, that's but I mean, like, that's kind of a sign of the times too. It's just looking like this was like the Wild West, reckless era of wrestling, and they paid for it. They paid for it down the line. But this was, this was where they took those shots to the head and just a lot of unnecessary stuff that, down the road.
But it was the time, think about when I think about that, this is around the time we moved to LA, like my just weird sense memories of the time. It's Limp Bizkit songs. It's violence. It's Christina Aguilera and her Dirty video. Like it's just this weird era we're in. We're just like excess. Let's do it. Maxim magazines on every shelf. Let's do it. And like,
you know what it was? It was kind of like, and I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, but it makes me wonder if we're headed down this way somewhere again, where it was this rise of counterculture, where it was the Jerry Springer, it was the South Park, it was the rejection of this PC culture that had kind of been formed, in the Reagan administration and a little bit later after that. And then all of a sudden, here comes this very angry, this very rebellious degeneration, and so that's where it was just like, by the time we get to 2000, it has reached like a saturation point where it's almost like, looking back now, like comical how like everything's loud, everything's huge and loud and middle fingers and butts and boobies,
butts and boobies,
boobies and middle fingers. Let's keep talking manias here. So that was one that doesn't really hold up for me. Do you have another one that holds a special fond place in your heart?
Yeah, I want to go to. I'm going to get some of the older ones out of the way, and then go to some later ones that either I watched or rediscovered. But WrestleMania 3, it is the first. I mean, even if they fudge the numbers in the Pontiac Silverdome, it doesn't matter. It is this giant spectacle that's just 2 years removed from WrestleMania 1 at Madison Square Garden, which is an old style wrestling. The ropes are loose, a special delivery Jones and the executioner on the it's a different era. And by 3, you see Vinnie Mac, and you can throw all the barbs at him, and I understand. And he's got a lot of enemies, but I also have always kind of, it's like respecting Tywin Lannister. I've always respected what he's done. We are living in his world. And WrestleMania 3, you see it when he's out there doing the announcement. He's talked about how he was, felt his father or who had passed away since then. And it's crazy. And I some of the biggest reactions. I'm a Piper mark. Piper coming out against Adrian Adonis, and the word was he was retiring. And 2 years ago, he's the most hated man in wrestling, and perhaps even the pop culture landscape. And he's coming out to these cheers. He's doing the Piper thing coming out. That's working. Even Danny Davis is kind of over as a heel. The Dream Team, Harley Race is in the WWF. That's crazy. And then the Steamboat Savage one is people talk about that match for a long time, and they should, but it's great. And Hogan Andre, man, and it's 12 minutes of folklore and legend, and who knows what's entirely true, but I buy into it every time. And is it an exciting match? Hell no. But it's storytelling, and wrestling is a storytelling art form, and they told that one perfectly for a year plus to get to that, and it works, and it set the standard for WrestleMania going forward in my mind.
Yeah, I kind of see WrestleMania 3. That was like, that's the bar, that was the bar. And there have been many WrestleManias that I feel like have exceeded it, and many WrestleManias that have fallen short of it. I even think that, when you talk about that main event, Hogan, Andre, it's easy to forget, like, the biggest pay-per-view of WWF of all time was 28, which was Rock versus Cena. A match like that was just, you couldn't believe that was happening. But that's what Andre and Hulk had built to that fever pitch of like, this was more than just a standard match. And when you look, Hogan's actually pretty smart about this, because he did the same thing at WrestleMania 18 with The Rock, where it was this awful match.
Yeah.
but you wouldn't know it because you were so sucked into the electricity of what was happening. And that's what wrestling is at its very best, is when you're not nitpicking the ring work.
It's the suspension of disbelief for the audience. It is true storytelling. And this is why, and I know you've probably spent your whole life talking to people who just don't like wrestling, don't get it. And I have some close friends who I don't try to convince them. I'm like, I don't need to convince you. You don't need to convince me. I'm there for the storytelling, and I've had the pleasure of booking a little bit on the small indie level. And there was one night we just we had our own kind of battle royal, and we told the story of we had an 18-year-old 130-pound rookie and in front of his hometown in Simi Valley, and we told the story of him coming in, getting his ass beat the entire time, and the last guy is him and 400-pound Terex, who is this great wrestler who would do a standing moonsault, 400 pounds. I actually took the move one time, and I'll brag about that one. And he won. Brett won. We called him the Maybe Kid. And 300 people in Simi Valley will never forget that night. And when you tell those stories, you don't remember that this kid probably couldn't pull off a move at the time, and he was just. It brings people to tears that night, that we know, because it was just we all the, and that is WrestleMania 3. And you're right, and other things have exceeded it. I'm a big Beatles fan, right? And even you can look at or some of the early songs, and I've heard you can have the Beatles aren't as good as they should. Okay, fine. Music gets better, but they set the standard on lyrics on the back of albums, how to record things, how to be a band. Stones, all those people are there too. Don't get me wrong, but yeah. They set it, and people started to exceed it because they built on this this foundation they built. WrestleMania 3 is, I think, the foundation for all WrestleManias.
I agree, because one was just like, is this going to work? And it did. One is just not interesting to me. That's why we're not really talking about it. 2, I think, does not work at all.
It's not good.
Yeah, 2 is just not good. It's very scatterbrained because it's in literally 3 different places. Yep. And 3 is where I feel like they're like, all right, WrestleMania, let's get our stuff together. And it became the event.
It's a giant leap. It's a giant, pun intended with Andre. It's a giant leap from 2 to 3.
Oh, yeah, because this is where they were like, we build all year to this. That's what we're doing now. I just want to real quick, just kind of lightning round a couple of WrestleManias that I don't think we'll get too into any of them, but just worth kind of highlighting before we kind of wrap up with the ones that I think we've intentionally danced around, because there's still some biggies that we haven't talked about. But I want to talk real lightning quick. WrestleMania 18, as I said, I think that's all built around Hogan Rock, but I think that they learned their lesson that tradition needs to be broken, because you shouldn't maybe always end on that championship match. A great WrestleMania, but poor Jericho. That was his big one, and no one remembers it.
Yep. Yeah, no, look, 18 was one I had to study a little bit later on. I didn't watch it live, and I had to go, and when I wrote this Rock Austin documentary, I studied that one. And you're right. That is the Hogan Rock match, a 5-star extravaganza? No, but man, what a story! And 2 wrestlers who know, 2 workers who know what to do, and to feel that energy. It's electric. It's one of the most electric matches I think I've ever seen.
We talked about 19. 20 is one where it all begins again. We're going back to Madison Square Garden. To me, it's just a mixed bag. There's some good stuff, but ultimately, I don't think it lives up to the it all begins again moniker. What is kind of cool is 20 and 21 both have new champions that would usher in new eras. And while we thought it would be the Benoit Guerrero kind of era, didn't really pan out like that. But the next year at 21, which I think is a great WrestleMania, was the rise of Cena and Batista. And that truly was, again, a lot like 19 and a lot like 14, which is another great one with Shawn giving it to Austin. That was kind of like, we're moving in another direction now. And, Evolution has done what it's meant to do, which is we've made some new main eventers. Cena is going to eventually carry this company. So 21, I think, is definitely, when you look back at the history of WWE, that's one of those ones where, maybe the matches were all real, Angle and Shawn Michaels a dream match, but the rest of the match was like, yeah, they're fine, but that's one of those like, you know, those watershed kind of ones where everything changed. 22 really disappoints me because at this point it doesn't feel like WrestleMania. It's in a small arena. I don't know why we took a huge step back into small arenas. And then just kind of, you know, going through this quickly. 23. Any thoughts on 23? Cena, Michaels, Undertaker, Batista, and of course the Trump head shave match.
I was not watching during this time. I'll tell you that much. But I was starting to get back into it. I really about 05. I didn't go to WrestleMania 21, but I went to the Hall of Fame induction the night before, which was Piper and Hogan and that era. That was a fun experience. And so then I kind of dipped out, and then 09 I started to come back in 2010. I actually got back into wrestling with Millennium Pro Wrestling in SoCal here. So I don't have too much of a memory of 7, and I don't know if I want to right now, but I
think you're in the right. Like, I think once we get to about 22, 23, 24, definitely 25, 6 and 25 and 6, it's like there's one standout absolute great match and a whole lot of just like, okay, you know, like I think 24 is good, but that's the Ric Flair retirement WrestleMania. That's what it is. Everything else, I don't know. 25 I think is god awful, but it has maybe the best wrestling match in WWE history of Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker. So you kind of just like, okay, it's not until we get to WrestleMania 28 where WrestleMania brought back a lot of people, myself included, to see the stalwart of the Attitude Era, The Rock, versus John Cena. And I will die on this hill. I grew up a Rock fan. The Rock was the reason I got it, you know, so into wrestling. John Cena should have won that match, and John Cena is kind of my guy now.
First of all, I'll say 25. I'm glad you. That one was a bad one, and only because we're coming off a pretty good Flair retirement. You had some good stuff, and the Michaels Undertaker stuff, obviously great. But 25 years, man, and it was like Santino Marella wins the women's battle royal, like all that stuff.
Something with Mickey Rourke. It was just dumb.
I got to 27. You know, I'm gonna say maybe 27 is good. I was all in on Miz at that time. I thought that was a great run, and I go ahead.
Can I tell you what the issue with 27 is? Because first of all, I was very excited for that one again because The Rock was back.
The Rock was hosting.
The problem with that main event, and the reason why, at least to me, I think that WrestleMania is so lackluster, is because they had a boiling hot feud in the main event. But your champion wasn't part of that feud. It was The Rock and Cena, and your champion is the weird third wheel that kind of doesn't have anything to say. And I think the heat in that match, they just had no heat. He had zero heat. He had like maybe X-Pac heat, which is not good heat, you know?
Right. Yeah, no, 27. Like I'm glad Miz is still going strong, you know, and has these dips and valleys and everything. And I thought that guy really has always kind of had to prove himself against a lot of detractors, and I think he's got a Hall of Fame career. And I like, great. I like the run, but you're right. It quickly became it was unbelievable to think that The Rock was even back. His return it was back, and it was Cena him, and the setup. 27. Yeah, I do love 28, and I remember that it was 28 had excuse me, 28 had that electric energy. Whether or not the card itself met those expectations, we could talk about that. But that main event had that kind of sizzle to it.
That main event, I think it's one of those things where the main event, it not only carries the show in your memory, but I kind of feel like it carried the show for the performers that day, because they knew like everyone's here to see them. So let's give I want to, you know, I want to steal the show. I want to make it so that you're actually talking about my match on the way home. Like, it's hard. Like, don't forget, there was an end of an era Hell in a Cell Triple H versus Undertaker match on that same card that same night. Now, this was also the night that we got the, you know, 10-second whatever loss to Daniel Bryan. And but in a weird way, I kind of feel like that started his momentum because people were like, this guy deserves better.
We could have a long conversation about that. Tonight's not the night. I actually love that moment. I think it made him, and I think there's somewhat an intentional part of that. It also made sense for the story. It made sense for him as a champion. It really did to me to go out that way. And it was shocking. And we're talking about it now, almost 10 years later. So I think it worked, and it just made the event of anything could happen. It sounds cliche, but it's like, you're like, oh, God, if they're going to do that, what can happen? So I actually like it. And yeah, I'm looking at the card right now, and it's like, wow, yeah, Team Johnny versus Team Teddy. But Punk Jericho, I have good memories of. I'll say it now. Maybe it's because I got to know her a little bit when I was working with her. Maria Menounos loves wrestling, and I think she went all out. And does she have more WrestleMania wins than Jerry Lawler? Yeah. But for a celebrity appearance, I didn't think she did too bad. And if they're going to have celebrities, I want them to at least do that kind of stuff.
100%. And I think, talking about the main event, is it the best match of all time? No. But again, it's another one of those things where the WrestleMania energy carries it. A fantastic finish. And I loved that John Cena, a lot of times baby faces, they're pretty stupid. They have to be stupid or else things don't work. And I love that John Cena gets in the exact same position the next year at WrestleMania 29. And you're like, dude, what are you doing? This is how you lost last time. And it's a trap. He's playing possum for The Rock because he's like, yeah, you're not getting me again this time, Rock. So I like that, even though I think 29 ultimately is a victim of just like poor timing in terms of like that show just was not spaced out very well. I think they had to cut a couple things. Right. 29 feels very like it's a long show, but it also feels very rushed. There's like no backstage segments in that show. It's just we gotta go.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have 3 20-minute matches to close it, as you think you should. But you got 9-minute matches, 6-minute match, an 8-minute match, and that's sometimes par for the course. But I remember you're right. I remember thinking like that was a rush one.
It was just over so fast. What struck me was they didn't even play like their legendary kind of like feud recap videos before The Rock, John Cena. They're like, no, we're just going. You know what it is by now. Let's get to WrestleMania 30 real quick because I actually think this is a great WrestleMania, and I think the Taker streak thing, even I've seen it a couple times now, and even though I know it's coming, I still can't believe that it's coming.
I love 30. I really do have a lot of positive memories. That opening match of Daniel Bryan versus Triple H, I thought was just electric. That we keep throwing that word around. That's a key to wrestling, key to getting over is just that electric feel. It had the Shield at the time. I mean, come on, Shield was they were over. Throw that term around. You go Cesaro winning the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. Like it's a little false hope that Cesaro is everyone wants him to get to the top of the mountain. And it was one of those maybe moments where we thought he might have actually do it. But as far as the main event worked really well for me. Lesnar Undertaker, like I could go either way. I still love it. I'm a Lesnar fan on this run when he came back and part-time and everything. I think it helped. WWE. He brought his stature and helped kind of usher, wrestling into this new era where everyone's really in on the work. Everyone's like, oh, he's no longer punching for quote real, and he's coming, but we're here for it. And in this social media age where, you can see a worker tweeting, non-kayfabe stuff, and that's what it is now. We can't go back. And I'm not even talking about terms of kayfabe, but just like social media has changed wrestling. And this is one of those events that I think it was part of that new era. Is it a big turning of the chapter like you keep talking about? Maybe. But, was Lesnar a young up and coming rookie that needed this win to move forward? No. But it was, we're talking about it now. We remember that more than almost anything else on this card.
We're going to put a pin in 31. We're going to close on that. 32, I already said, I think is maybe the worst. Maybe it's the worst because I actually had to sit through it there. Because it's bad, but also it's just like I felt trapped. 33, I thought was a pretty good rebound. Unfortunately, I think the main event, I just don't think Taker was quite up for it, and he said as much in his documentary that he just was very disappointed. But overall, I think Goldberg and Lesnar over delivered what I thought. I think the return of the Hardys was really fun.
Great one. Yeah.
I think there's, look, it's super kitschy, but I kind of like the Cena proposes to Nikki Bella, even though it's not going to pan out to anything. But that feels just dumb enough to be WrestleMania worthy. I think that one's decent. It's pretty good. It's fairly entertaining, not life changing.
No.
34 to me is by far my favorite set design for a WrestleMania. This was back in New Orleans 4 years later after 30.
Right.
And it's that big kind of Mardi Gras mask. Favorite set design. Maybe the best opening match in WrestleMania history with the triple threat match for the Intercontinental title. It just another nosedive. This show just goes downhill from there with a lot of baffling decisions. I very much dislike the Braun Strowman plucks a kid out of the crowd angle for the tag team match.
Right.
I think we all just kind of put too much pressure on AJ Styles and Shinsuke, and that one was kind of Charlotte going over Asuka's undefeated streak was just another head scratcher. And then again, another main event that got booed out of the building with Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, where I think before, maybe people would root for Reigns for Lesnar just because it was fun to watch him tear someone apart. But truly, nobody wanted either of these guys to win, and there was no money on the bank in the horizon. So it was just like people just weren't happy.
Yeah, I remember. And again, I
think you and I were texting during this one.
I do remember that.
Yeah.
Snark texting wrestling. My pal Joe Rucciarella do that too a lot. I remember. Again, I've loved Lesnar off and on during this run, but I also quite got to admit that's because part of it is Heyman's there, and the fact that Paul Heyman coming back at any capacity when he did, I still couldn't believe that. That was almost bigger for me than The Rock. So it's good, but I do remember. And then Brock wins, and it's just and
the bait and switch a little bit of Cena Undertaker, where it's just like, well, why did this was pointless? If you're not going to do it, then just don't do it, So that one I think is a little bit of a letdown. We get to 35, very first ever women's main event, which I think was a great match with a very head scratching finish. To this day, I don't know if that was the planned finish or if something happened and they just went for it. Again, this is another show that I think you cut a third of this show out and it's probably a pretty solid one. But we're here for so long that by the end, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't do another one.
Yeah. Nope. This is I've ordered 2 pizzas already. I'm on to dessert and I want to go to sleep. And I thought it was important to have the women close the show. And I think it will stand the test of time. It's a good decision. But I made a little botch maybe at the end or whatever that was. A lot of stuff. Yeah. Again, big. This is where they're trying to do. We are WrestleMania, the showcase of the immortals. Let's be immortal. And it doesn't always work.
So we're going to get back to 31, but Ken, before we kind of wrap this out, is there anything left on your list anything you want to throw out there?
You talked about 30. I really did want to talk about that. I put 35, I put 31 down. We can talk about that, but and it's funny, but we could go to every card and find a moment that works and find a moment that stands the test of time. And it's like my old photography teacher taught me right around the time of WrestleMania 9, or actually 11. You shoot a roll of 25 to get hopefully one that works. And I'm okay with that over long term. Sitting through them, even at home, it can be a little painful. But that's also wrestling, man. You're here for the silly. You're here for the things that don't work. And you're here for those moments where it all does. So, yeah.
I would be remiss if, before we close this out, I didn't at least acknowledge that, to make a great WrestleMania, I think, you need a card that is super stacked and they mostly delivers. I will say when at least a third of your show is one match, and that match is one of the all-time greats in WrestleMania 12's main event of the Iron Man match between Brett and Shawn. Like I said, I was like you. I think I was much more into the entertainment than I was the sports for a long time, and that was the first time I sat and was like, that's what it means to have a great match. Just two athletes putting it all out there for an hour plus. I just think like WrestleMania 12 has a lot of just like, I'm not a fan of the Gold Dust Piper stuff. The Triple H Ultimate Warrior thing is pathetic, but that one match, and it takes up a good hour because it's an Iron Man match, worth the price of admission. And definitely like, I think that again, when I talk about like Shawn Michaels is my favorite, Mr. WrestleMania, like, I don't know if you can I know 25 with Undertaker is like the gold standard, but I think for me, it's still Brett and Shawn.
Austin Brett, is that at 13?
That's at 13, the submission match.
Which is good. Yeah, which is good. But that one, you're right. That's right at the era too. And it looked, and I stayed brand loyal to WWF. I really did. I would tune in on WCW, and I get why they hot shot their way to the top of the ratings for a bit, taking nothing away from their accomplishments. But I stuck through WWF in the thin times, and this was the thin times. But that match it should be celebrated for a little bit of an old school vibe. It's like you're going back to the Garden in '76. They're going to go an hour.
And what I love about that match, especially now, is like the vignettes they would do. It's like Brett was off of TV, and when they would show him, he's like, I'm training for this match. Like the match felt like such a big deal. Like I can't be at Raw every week because this match is going to take everything that I have, which I think is really cool. So I want to end the show on what I believe is the best WrestleMania of all time, which is WrestleMania 31. That's the one to beat.
Okay.
Asterisk, by the way, we haven't talked about 36, and I don't count it, and I don't fault them. I don't blame them. I don't think it's fair to judge it or criticize. They did the best they could trying to put on a show in a day's notice. It's not a WrestleMania to me, but whatever.
No, I have a lot of respect for them, and the Styles Undertaker match is good. It is what it is, and it's good. Yeah, I watched that. I watched that one with sympathy. These are performers going out there. Edge, it's just, what can you do? It
was also the pandemic was so new. I feel like I wasn't ready to be distracted yet. I was still, but that's neither here or there. 31. The reason why I think this is the greatest WrestleMania of all time is because it does everything that sports entertainment is supposed to do. I think this is a card that has amazing matches. And on paper, a lot of these matches just didn't. It was like, okay, I guess that would be pretty good. Almost every match over delivers. And on top of that, they give you WrestleMania moments that maybe don't even quite make sense to storytelling, but it makes sense to WrestleMania. And I think specifically I'm talking about DX versus the NWO, something I wanted to see my entire life. Right. I'm sitting in Levi Stadium. Ken, Mo Lightning? Ask him. He sat right next to me. The minute the DX music hit, I stood on my chair and screamed. Yeah. The minute the NWO music hit, a sound came out of me that I have tried for 6 years to replicate, and I've not been able to make that same squeal. Seeing them face off, and it made no sense. Sting fought the NWO and WCW. Why would they be coming to his defense? Sure. It makes no sense, but it doesn't matter because that's what those moments, those true magic moments are about. It was a great match between Triple H and Sting. It was adding the little, the sprinkles on top of like Attitude Era, seeing NWO and DX and just the whole thing. I'm like, that's what WrestleMania is to me. Maybe it doesn't fit, and you can be like, well, wait a minute, that blah, blah. It doesn't matter. WrestleMania is the night where anything can happen. Everything should happen. You have a main event where Brock and Roman, nobody quite wants either of them to walk out of it, and you're kind of hoping, but you don't know what's going to happen. And then all of a sudden, WWE decides we're not going to put it on Roman and have this place kind of go out just like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
They make a brand new star. I mean, Seth Rollins is already a star, but they make him a main eventer that night and maybe one of the loudest pops I've ever heard, ever, which is him coming in, cashing in the Money in the Bank. I just think there's so many storytelling things in that WrestleMania that, to me, look, there's two WrestleMania, 31 and 17, I think, are kind of like part one and part two to me. If someone's like, which WrestleMania do I watch? I say, watch these two because they both have storytelling. It's sports, it is storylines, and it's stunts. And I think both of these have that. For me, I know everyone's saying WrestleMania 17, greatest WrestleMania of all time. It's so close, but I think 31 actually gets the job completely done.
Wow, this is a hot take with Billy Biz. Yes, 17 is probably the one that's considered the number one. But you do have a gimmick battle royal with Iron Sheik winning. So is it?
I mean, 17. You know why 17 is so great is because days before WWE had just purchased WCW, and WrestleMania 17 feels almost like a victory lap. It feels like everybody just has a little bit more of a spring in their step. They can sigh a big thing of relief because even if they've been winning for well over a couple of years now, it's over. They won, and now we're going to go out and we're going to show you why we won. And that's what 17 has. But 31, I feel like, has a different kind of energy. 31 is we have to... this isn't the best WrestleMania on paper, but we're going to make it the best WrestleMania. And they did. Somehow they did.
Look, I remember, the Rollins pop was great. I remember some corners of pundits maybe not being happy with some of the Sting stuff. Look, it was 10 years too late, maybe for Sting, but it was important. I remember feeling moved by the fact that he was just there. And anytime Daniel Bryan's going to bring it, he goes over. And look, AJ Lee Page, I Page Mark from back in the day too, and that worked for me. And Cena Rusev is probably underrated in a sense because I do like Rusev, and we can have conversations about how he was used or not used well. This I want to revisit this. I think I'm going back to the sense memory of the big moments, and
I mean, you have.
It ends
possibly the greatest RKO of all time off of Seth Rollins' back. You think he's going for the curb stomp and then boom, RKO. I think you have Taker coming back and he has a chip on his shoulder because that he's not happy, especially in hindsight. He's not happy. He just didn't feel like himself in that 30, probably because he got knocked silly halfway through it. So you have a Taker that's like, okay, not only is he not retired, he's not gone, he's back and puts on a great match with Bray Wyatt. There's also, to me, something just very special. And I think maybe this is, tell me how you feel, especially because 9 is so important to you. There's something special about outdoor wrestling in kind of the day, early evening with that sun. It just felt special. It felt different. It didn't feel like we were in an everyday, even like a big WrestleMania, like 17 in the Dome, which is huge, but it's like we're just like it has a different feel. It has a different energy.
I do like it, and when the sun goes down, you kind of know the main event's coming. But I'll go to WrestleMania 9. Again, I know that doesn't stand the test of time as a good WrestleMania. I know, and then the Hogan thing, and now we know a little more of the behind the scenes stuff. I get all that. But me and my friends, we're 17. We're in togas in our living room. No woman's talking to us. No one's talking to us. Man, woman, friend, or foe. We are by ourselves, maybe about 4 friends, watching WrestleMania, and the sun shining, and Heenan falling off the camel, and Jim Ross shows up, and we're like, oh my God, the WCW announcer's here now. And then that first match when Michaels and Tatanka are going in the sun, I think you're right. I go back to 9, and anytime I see it now, it's a warm, like the sun shining down on me, fuzzy feeling, and I'm okay with outdoor wrestling, swap meet wrestling on a grand scale.
I absolutely, that was a special one for me. I think also, my very first WrestleMania, just taking it all in. I forgot my sunglasses, so I had to buy Brie Bella sunglasses.
That's not a bad thing, Billy.
They're the only ones available. And I think, I think you could make an argument, honestly, 17-31, and it just comes down to emotion. And honestly, I think that's what wrestling comes down to just in general. It's obviously I know they know who's going to win. And obviously a lot of these things are very predictable, especially at WrestleMania.
Yeah.
But I think that's part of the fun of it. I think if you get into it, if you let yourself go, it's tough because wrestling is built on kind of, like you said, a sense of disbelief, and there's so much cynicism in it, which is so counterintuitive to what wrestling is. Like,
Right.
I feel like even the hardest critics sometimes kind of forget a little bit at WrestleMania.
They should. No, and I think I love your decision to choose 31 because I always say, and I talk a lot about this in music, like we lock certain things in as classics. WrestleMania 3 is a standard bearer, and it is. And I talk about those are the foundations that this is built on. But sometimes it also means we can be afraid to name something new a classic. One of my favorite artists says, every album I've released gets panned and they all say it's not as good as the last one. But they said the same thing about the last one. It's hard to call something new a new classic, and so maybe that's kind of what you're going out on a limb and saying with 31, and it's of its era, it's of its time, and it's a classic for what it is. So there you go.
I have the poster right behind me hanging on my wall. Yeah, it's signed by a lot of the guys. 31 means a lot to me. WrestleMania means a lot to me.
Yeah.
Look, here's the thing. I have zero interest at any single match on this card for this weekend, another 2-night WrestleMania, and I will be there both nights. And I'm sure that there's going to be WrestleMania moments on both nights because WrestleMania always just gets the benefit of the doubt from me now. Mm-hmm. There's just no two ways around it. One other interesting fact that I kind of on our way out, that rewatching WrestleManias, if you have a theme song and the original artist comes to sing the theme song for your entrance, you are most likely going to lose. Statistically speaking, you are most likely going to lose should the original artist sing you to the ring. So I'm curious to see who could be sung to the ring this year.
Yeah. Wow. That's going to be good. Look, and I tell you, I'm as you're talking, I'm bummed that this is probably the first one I'm not going to be watching live in about 12 years. So I'll have to maybe after we get off this podcast here, I sign up for the Peacock.
Ken, it's cheaper than WWE Network. You're saving money.
It's true.
It's $5. $5 for the Showcase the Immortals. Vince, you owe me.
Yeah, maybe you're convinced me because I was paying up to, what was it, $14.99 at the time when it finally it shut down. So all right, maybe you will. Maybe you convince me.
$5 and you can watch The Office while you're waiting. That's on Peacock this weekend. That was Ken Napzok and I talking WrestleMania, the only wrestling episode that will be happening on this podcast. So Ken, thanks for coming by. I know we usually talk some form of Lucasfilm, but thanks for talking about one of your other passionate loves.
I absolutely love this business, this world. Even when I dip out of it, I'm always still kind of aware of who's there and what's going on, and I love talking it, man. It's truly a great American art form and worldwide art form too, to be clear. But yeah, love it.
So next week we will be back with a regular episode. Regular meaning we will be talking about movies. So, well, I don't know why I'm talking condescending to you. If you've listened all the way to this point, you're probably jazzed that we talked about wrestling this week. But next week we're going to talk about movies as we march to the series finale of Hot Takes with Billy Biz coming up. Not too long. We probably have maybe a handful of episodes left before the end. But guess what? Just like WrestleMania, these podcasts will live forever somewhere. I don't know. Download them now because I'm not paying hosting fees after this is over. Thank you guys so much for listening. And one way or another, I'll see you guys next week.